Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Today is Monday, March 24th. I hope everybody's having a great day so far. It was a wild weekend in sports. We had everything you could possibly want. We had a couple upsets, maybe a little underwhelming on the amount of upsets, but we had some. We had buzzer beaters, the first real buzzer beaters in multiple years. Crazy. Awesome weekend of college basketball that's just going to set up for an even better weekend next weekend when we get the Sweet 16. We're going to talk about all of that. We're going to talk about this tournament as a whole, and we're also going to talk a little bit about the transfer portal that opens up today. A weird timing. We'll talk a lot about college basketball and some NFL as well. The Giants have found potentially their starting quarterback this year in Jameis Winston, but we'll get into all of that in a second. Before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go ahead and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful Monday, March 24th. But like I was saying, we are going to get into our first topic here today, and that's the question that I have heard far too often this weekend. Is this the worst March Madness ever? And we're going to start off with the simple answer, the short answer, no. It absolutely is not. Sure, it doesn't have those 13 seeds, those magical Cinderella moments that we've come to know in March Madness. That has coined the term March Madness as opposed to just the NCAA men's basketball championship. This is March Madness for a reason. We're used to seeing our FGCUs of 2013. We're used to seeing our FDUs of a couple years ago, those 16 seeds, those 15 seeds that go on runs. This year, there just weren't that many upsets. We had a couple teams, double-digit seeds move on. We had our one true upset in McNeese take down Clemson in the first round. But outside of them, you had Colorado State, who's played really good basketball through this tournament, gets eliminated by Maryland last night. They go out there. They were favored in that first round, right? You had an 11 seed go on. You had a 10 seed that's still alive. That's the lowest seed still available. This is the fewest amount of upsets since the Sweet 16 first began. That is how non-mad, or how mild, I should say, this March Madness has been, right? But that doesn't make it the worst March Madness ever. We have seen a lot of great moments. The athleticism put on display by a lot of these teams has been incredible. We got Coach Cal versus Coach Pitino, right? That doesn't happen too often. It was the fifth time they've ever met up in conference in the NCAA tournament. That was a great game to watch. These round of 32 games especially were amazing. We saw the 1 seeds really get tested outside of Duke against a really tough 8-9 field that went up against them. We saw Creighton put Auburn against the ropes a little bit. We saw Florida get pushed all the way to the buzzer by a team in UConn that had won 13 straight games. We saw a Gonzaga team that was heavily underseeded push Houston to the limit a little bit there at the end. These were all really good games against some really quality opponents. This is not the worst March Madness ever. And if you have people going out there and saying that this is the worst March Madness ever because we don't have that Cinderella moment, because we don't have that 14 seed, that 11 seed that makes a big run that we've kind of been accustomed to over the years, I say good. Look, the reason that March Madness is so special and the reason why we celebrate these underdogs so much is because it's hard to do. And when you take a look at the field, that was out there for this year's March Madness, it was the best top of the field that there has ever been in March Madness. You want to go off KenPom, FPI, whatever you want to do. This, by all of the advanced analytics, all of those metrics, was the most talented group of top 4 seeds that we have ever seen. Now, we still have a couple 6 seeds. Ole Miss here. We've got a 5 seed in Michigan up in the top left corner of your bracket. We've got a 10 seed down in the bottom left corner of your bracket. We've got another 6 seed coming in BYU in the top right of your bracket, right? But that is just 4 teams out of 16 still alive that aren't your expected by the number teams. Your 1 through 4 seeds that should technically be here as long as no upsets happen. And again, upsets are a part of March Madness, but they aren't what make March Madness great. What makes March Madness great is the moments. And just because we're not seeing double-digit seeds that often advance here does not make this the worst March Madness ever. I've also seen people bring up the point that maybe NIL and the transfer portal killed March Madness. And we'll get all into the transfer portal later on in our show because it opened today, which is a massive mistake. It should, like football, be after the playoffs are done, and there isn't really even a real reason for college basketball here, but that's another argument I've heard. They're saying, oh, take a look at the FAU squad that made the Final Four just a couple years ago. Their top 3 scorers now on Michigan, a 5 seed that's in the Sweet 16, Florida, a 1 seed in the Sweet 16, and Arkansas, a 10 seed in the Sweet 16. That is something to point to. We all know this has been happening. This has been happening forever in the transfer portal, right? We knew that FBS teams or group of 5 teams or these mid-major conferences continue to get poached. Water will find its level, right? The same thing happened early on in a lot of these other college sports. Water will find its level in college basketball. There will be those Cinderellas again. People are saying there will never be another Cinderella run in college basketball, and that is being a prisoner of the moment. That is being stuck in what is happening right now when we see historically talented 1, 2, 3, and 4 seeded teams. When we see these juggernauts at the top of the sport that we just don't see every year. That is how talented this group is. This is a group that might go down in history as one of the most talented Sweet 16 groups we have ever seen, and maybe one of the more talented ones we will ever see. It is hard to get a group of teams, this many teams, this talented. And it's not because this is the worst March Madness ever. It's because this is actually setting up to be one of the best March Madnesses ever. One thing that makes March Madness so special, and one reason that I think last year didn't have a lot of juice really, was because the games weren't good a lot of times, right? You had UConn winning by 30 plus, and it just felt like they were going to win. You can't look at me with a straight face and say that you know who's going to win this tournament. Nobody does. Duke might look like the best team out there, but when you compare them to the other teams, they've had the easiest road to the Sweet 16. Obviously, you got the 16 seed first. Then they play the weakest 9 seed in Baylor. And I'm not saying Baylor was bad, but compared to the other 1 seeds, what they had to go through, UConn, Creighton, these teams that have made deep runs, Gonzaga, all of these teams that have made deep runs in recent tournament memory with very good coaches at the top, very good historic programs behind them. And when you compare that to Baylor, who, yes, won a national championship in the last 5 years, but that's not the same team. Don't be kidding yourself. That is not the same Baylor team that won that national championship. They are not on that same level as Gonzaga, as UConn, not even really as Creighton, although I think you might be able to make that argument with Creighton. But Duke has had the easiest path. So there isn't a team out there that I think is looking like they are the champion, which when you take that and the fact that this is one of the most talented groups of 16 teams that has ever made it to the Sweet 16 together, the Sweet 16, the Elite 8, the Final Four, and the championship game should be a bloodbath, and we saw a little preview of that in the round of 32. So if you ask the question, is this the worst March Madness ever? The answer is absolutely not. And you just have to wait and be patient, and you're going to get some of the best basketball you've ever seen in March in a very long time. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. What do you think? Is this the worst March Madness ever? What do you think about this tournament having a lack of upsets? I know it's an interesting thing. It's something that we don't see too often, so I'm very curious to hear your thoughts. Let me know in the comments. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to break down all of the massive moments from the round of 32, from buzzer beaters to upsets to great coaching matchups. We're going to talk about it all. That's coming up next here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.